We've spoken a lot about trust today. Have you been able to recover any salary from Huw Edwards?
We have not. I think Tim may ask. We've obviously asked, and we've said it many times, but he seems unwilling to it. There was a moment that we thought that he might just do the right thing for a change. Clearly decided not to. Tim, have you got any more on it? I don't think we've heard, you see. And
there's nothing you can do to
I don't think
compel him
legally
to give back the money?
No, we've made the request and we've looked at taking legal advice. That's where we are.
It's quite frustrating, this, really, because you think... I think he should have done it. He could still do it. It's not right. He's taken licence fee payers' money, and he knew what he'd done, and he should return it now.
Can you give us examples of what actions the BBC has taken as a result of recent high-profile cases of misconduct?
Yeah, there've been a number of specifics. Because remember the recent case, the Tim Westwood case. Tim Westwood was about 20 years ago. Russell Brand was also quite a long time ago. Tim Westwood was over a long period of time. Russell Brand was more specific. There have been specific processes that have, in response to particular cases. That's not to say we've fixed the problem. Even though we've responded, and Tim can spell out the responses we've made to our, but we have yet to fix the problem. Now, it may be, you could say to me, would we ever fix the problem, given the profound nature of it? But I think we could do a lot more. But Tim, you could spell out what we've actually done.
And this, I think, let's just do the process and the culture, because they sit beside each other, and I think you can hear that we've faced these major issues in this industry. I don't think we're totally unique, but this abuse of power, we want to finish it. And I've said very clearly to the organisation and where we're at, we're all of the people that work across the BBC. And I want to touch on Indies because I think that relates earlier to, because I think that's really important, the work CISA are doing. I think where we've made real progress on a number of fronts. Firstly, versus those historical decades-old cases, we often, a couple of things were really clear, which is you often had things raised up and they just kind of stuck in their silo. We now have a specialist case management process that there's, if anything serious or even anything coming across through the BBC, it is joined up and gets referred up. I'll come to the need for someone to raise it through whistleblowing, because that's the point, if they need to raise it. But if it's raised, we are not in a situation that doesn't get visibility across the BBC and it's taken seriously. And if anyone's got examples of that not happening, that is a absolute grade one issue for me, because I don't believe that happens. We've got anti-bullying and harassment policies. We've standardised our complaints process. And in our latest research, about 70% of staff feel comfortable to raise issues. Now, I've got a mixed reception in my mind, as you can imagine, which is 70% is better than, I could parade out industry norms where we're better than most places. But that means 30% still are not quite comfortable enough to. So that's where I'm healthily dissatisfied in that. I think we are therefore encouraged by the Change Associates Review is another chance not to push enormous amounts of process, but make sure that I'm particularly interested in the practicalities of what actually happens on the ground with a line manager when you see something.
I add to that because you've heard that I've taken personal ownership of this. That's partly because I'm aware of it. I've worked on programme making, and I know that I've dealt with presenters who are quite full of themselves. Let's put it that way. And in some ways, they're talented. But because we work to make them good, there's a kind of cultural history. They become more and more full of themselves and start behaving badly. What we must do, we can never control how people behave, but what we can do is to empower the staff and change a culture. So no matter who this person is, the BBC is bigger than them. We can live without them. Right? And I need to bring about a change within the culture of the organisation, and genuine way, where junior member, middle manager say, this person out. We can do that. We can do that. We can't control individual human beings' way if they want to abuse things, but if they do, by God, we can make them go. Because we are bigger than them. The BBC is bigger than them. The history of the BBC is we have loads of people presented, and we make them stars. If they misbehave, out. We can do that.
Thank you. Paul? Dr. Shah, you started by saying one thing you were not expecting when you took over as chair of the BBC was to have a year full of succession of allegations about workplace misconduct by men. I mean, my question to you would be, where have you been for several years? If that wasn't
no,
your
it's more in terms of
expectation?
what I was. If you were to ask me what would be the board agenda last year, the first thing that came up was Huw Edwards. Then there was Jermaine Genius. Then there was Strictly. Then there was Greg Wallace. Then there was. I wasn't expecting that. It's not that I've worked in this business. I know it. But what I was just talking about, the extent to which it just kept coming and coming and coming. And admittedly, timing, some of this, when I first arrived, I was told in March, this time last year, the Russell Brand report would be coming out. It's going to come out in a couple of months' time. Then Tim Westwood report was going to come out. These are old reports, they've been commissioned, but they've all landed in my first year, is what I'm saying.
I get that.
I mean, I listened live to the Russell Brand story, so of course I knew about it.
Sure, and I accept the Director General suggests that things have improved in terms of reporting processes. But Director General, you did talk about that 30% who still perhaps don't feel safe working for the BBC, that you are worried about, rightly.
Comfortable.
Comfortable,
It's an
okay.
important distinction.
Comfortable, but
Thank you.
within that there'll be some who don't feel safe, I imagine. Now, you're right, you pointed out to the Tim Westwood review, which was produced last week, a cost of £3 million, I might point out.
Yep.
A long review, in-depth review. One of the most worrying findings in that independent report was that those who were effectively on the wrong end of Tim Westwood's behaviour said there was, quotes, a feeling they could not raise issues with the controller or other people in senior management because of the importance of the talent to Radio 1 and Radio 1 Extra. Now, Mr. Davey, you were director of audio at the time. Do you take any personal responsibility for that culture, the fact that those staff felt that they couldn't?
Of course I do. I don't want people to be in workplaces where they feel they can't raise issues. It's not my style. It's not how we should work. And I think if people were, you can't, when you're doing a job at director level with thousands of people, be on top of everything. But at the end of the day, if that person would have exec producer and the controller, and if they didn't feel that confidence, that's the problem. Of course it is.
You think that's changed?
I think, yes, I do think, I honestly, because we've got a joined up system where you've got whistleblowing, you can go beyond that. I just think the data says we've changed. Now, you're only as good as your weakest link, so I think there's constant vigilance in terms of where culture is not working properly. But certainly, the way I am talking to the top 300 leaders of the BBC is absolutely, I think, in a completely different place to where we were years ago. But you're only as good as what you're delivering. And I think, to the chair's point, this year we've had a number of instances. Part of it may be a reflection of just us moving now to a world in which some of this stuff is just unacceptable in terms of what was lived with. And some of it might not be criminal activity, but just frankly stuff this is completely inappropriate for a workplace in 2025. And I think people have been thinking, is that something also, do I raise that? How does that work? We're being very clear on that. I think the Change Associates report will help that as well.
Did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wondered what happened to the report Banijay commissioned into Greg Wallace. It was the end of last year.
They're doing their work, and we're waiting. We're hoping weeks, not months.
Okay, I'm curious to see. Yeah, they instructed a solicitor, didn't they? Again, there is an
Well,
issue about
once you do these things, there's a question of scope, and once you do these things, you've got to do them properly. So they've got to talk to everyone and make sure there's nothing.
But they've instructed a solicitor. It's not an independent inquiry.
As
They're paying the solicitor. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a Banijay-led inquiry,
And it's not concluded yet.
and it's not concluded yet.
Thanks, Rupert. I mean, I think that your point, Dr. Shah, is that there have been these people who are often referred to as talent, who are effectively the gods of television, not just at the BBC and other scandals on other channels, who almost felt that they were untouchable. They could behave how they wanted to, and in and outside of the workplace, and they were beyond anybody's power or control because people didn't feel they could report bad behaviour. Are you saying that no one is untouchable now, in sense of, there's no talent too big that...
Talent. There are powerful people behind the screens too. They don't have a right to abuse. No one is untouchable. No one is bigger than the BBC. No one is bigger than us determined to sort them sound. It's really, really important. It's 2025. We can't have this kind of behaviour and find it acceptable. It's certainly true that looking at Tim Westwood's behaviour, that would not be possible now, but there are others that, we just have to make sure that the BBC is a modern organisation. People who work for it feel able to voice their concerns if they have any, and that they will be dealt with, and that no one in the BBC is untouchable.
Everyone's dispensable. Everyone's dispensable.
Good.
That's the message.
But I mean, we have had situations in the past. With this was not in any way a reflection of the behaviour, but more of a conduct outside in terms of tweeting and what have you. People like Gary Lineker and the whole system sort of closed around him. But I mean, are you saying that situations like that are also, he was almost, Gary Lineker almost too big for the BBC to fire him?
Well, no, I don't, when you say the system closed around him, some of the other presenters felt that he had been mistreated. Yes, so it wasn't the system. I mean, the system was saying, working its way through under my leadership. Honestly, I can never say you're never going to get into situations as you deal with this industry and all the various things. But I think where you can say, to the earlier question, is we can wipe out within our workplace has that standard and it's non